Well, good afternoon. My name is Peter Bishop. I'm a professor of foresight, recently retired from the University of Houston. The University of Houston was the first university to actually create a degree in something called Studies of the Future. It was a school devoted to creating career or preparing career professionals in future studies. People who are going to help individuals and businesses, government agencies, and other organizations to be prepared for an uncertain future and to be able to influence that future to the extent that they could. We study the past, of course, and we study the present to some extent. We certainly learn about the present a lot in our media, broadcast media, social media, whatever. And there is some discussion about the future in the world. There is even now some discussion within government agencies and within businesses. They have departments of strategic planning and foresight and scanning and scenario development. That's becoming very, very common. In fact, most of my professional life, I was not only teaching in the university, I was also teaching in companies and in government agencies, teaching adults how to teach the future. My question then to you and to the world as a whole is, why are we not including that in school? And I have a lot of reasons why we don't include that in school, which I'm not going to go through right now because I want to point out that we can do that, and how we do that is important. I thought about where I learned about the future. Where did we all learn about the future if we never had a class in it? We learned in there anyway. We actually learned about the future in other subjects, even though the word never came up. We learned about the future in history. We've all studied history. Almost every year in school, we have a history class of some form or another. And a history, of course, is a story. Things happen and go on, and other things happen and go on, and other things happen and go on, step by step by step. It all seems to be pretty well set. I mean, there had to be this war, there had to be this invention, there had to be this person stand up and make enormous news for good or for ill, whatever. It all seemed to be pretty inevitable and almost determined. And we stopped. We didn't think in history about how things could have turned out differently. Rarely did that. It never occurred in my class, maybe never in yours. And so we are teaching history like a series of inevitable steps. So we think, oh, that's change. So the future will be a set of inevitable steps. Next thing, and then next thing, and the next thing. And that's what people want to do. What's next? And then what? And then what? And that's one way of thinking about the future, you'll see in a second, but it is not the only way. The other class where we learned about the future was in science class. Science class, the future is predictable. It has to be predictable for you to get a good grade, right? You have to predict, the period of the pendulum. You have to predict the how long it takes an ice cube to melt in a calorimeter in chemistry class or whatever. Those kinds of things are predictable. We said, well, if chemistry is predictable, then the economy should be predictable, and the politics should be predictable. And we think it's not today, but oh, just wait. When scientists and we do enough research, we will get to predictability in social life as well as physical life. I don't agree with that. I don't think that's going to happen. I certainly am not going to see it. We're not much closer. How many of the things that have happened in the last 30 years in the world were predictable? Going back from the Great Recession, going back to 9/11, going back to the fall of the Berlin Wall, going back to the appearance of the internet. None of that was predictable. Is that becoming less unpredictable, less uncertain? I think if anything, it's becoming more uncertain. So we came out of school with two views about the future, step by step by step by step, which we should be able to predict, and science telling us all of those things. The last way we came out of school thinking about the future was not what's going to happen in the world, but what is going to happen with us. What are we going to do? Our parents were telling us, our teachers, our mentors, our preachers, ministers, whatever, were saying, you can be anything you want to be. All you have to do is work hard, and all you have to do is set a goal, and you will achieve it. Which is partially true, but not completely true. We all know that you get more of your goal if you work at it, but you don't get it exactly. So let me tell you, we're really confused about the future today in school. Is it step by step, or is there uncertainty? Is it predictable, or is it not? Do we have control, or do we not? And not only are we confused, I want to tell you, unfortunately, your teachers are confused too. What we do in Teach the Future is to try and remedy that problem by giving teachers the concepts, the mindset, and the tools to be able to teach the future in ways that are very clear and useful, not predictable, but yet have a better sense of what the future could be and what we want it to be than if they did not have those tools. The University of Houston and now other universities teach master's degrees in studies of the future, or foresight as it's become to be called. And there are 3 topics that we take from that and we bring to the schools around the world, literally, in Poland and elsewhere. And the first of those ideas is change. You'd think we would study a lot about change in school. I mean, it's everywhere. It's all over the media. We're worried about it. We're anxious about it. We're celebrating it. We're thinking about all the new things that are coming, and all the challenges that we face is all about change. But I will guarantee that you never had a class about change itself. And in that sense, the first thing we do is talk about change. And there are a few things we talk about change and teach about change. But the first of those is that change comes from 2 places, not one. Change comes in our life from the world, and it comes from ourselves. Inbound change, we call it, which comes from the world. And frankly, the world is going on changing. I got news for you. You're not going to change that much. Whatever's going to happen in AI, whatever's going to happen in climate change, whatever's going to happen in politics, you and I and those people in this room are not going to have much influence on that. Yeah, we vote. We may participate in social media, but those big changes are going on, and we just basically have to say, here we are. The analogy I use is if you're a sports team, say a football team, and you wait for the visiting team to show up for the game, you don't have any influence over them. You can't say, oh, you can't use that player because that player's too good. No, that you have to play the team that shows up. We have to play our hand, like sitting at a card table. Our hand is the 2020s. Our hand is the first quarter or the first half of the 21st century. That's the hand. Our parents had a different hand. Our grandchildren will have a different hand. We have to play this hand. And we can play this hand, and that's the outbound change. We're not purely victims. Yeah, we have to put up with a lot, but we also have the opportunity to make some changes. For most of us, those changes are within our own life, making choices, preparing for the future, within our families, parents, our grandparents, our children, our grandchildren, and within our communities, within our work group, whatever. We do have some influence. We're not going to change the big issues very much, but we could change our life and to some extent. And frankly, doing that gives us what's called agency. We are agents of change. We are influencing change. And we should be teaching both how to anticipate changes in the world, and I'll point about that in just a second, and how to influence that world as we get going. The first of those sources of change is from the world. We call it inbound because it is out there and it is affecting us. Our life is constrained. It is influenced. The opportunities and the challenges that we have in life are dictated to a large extent by the world at large. So how do we know what's changing in that world? That is data. We can do research on that. What are the trends? What are people saying? What are plans on the table? What are people talking about? And that's the research part of studies of the future. It's not just making things up. It's not literature. It's not like science fiction where we just create a world. No, we have a world, and we study the changes going on in that world, and we move those changes on into the future. And that's what most people do when they predict the future. That's what consultants do. The famous people who say, oh, this is the size of the market, or this is who's going to win the election, and that. They're very clear because they're taking trends that are going on today and they're moving them out. That is one future, but not the only future. The future is actually many. It is not one. The future is not just one future. We call that the expected future. So if you're on a straight road and you're driving a car, you expect that road to be 1 mile, 5 miles, 10 miles later on down the road, maybe a few twists, but definitely a specific destination of the road. The road ends somewhere. That's the wrong image. We should be thinking about a river which branches out into the sea. the Nile River, the Mississippi River. It doesn't end like a road. It ends in all of these different branches. And the water, the logs, the canoes, the boats, some have choice. Some simply get swept into one channel or the other. That's the way we should think about the future. The future is many. There are many futures, not one. And the many futures are the expected future. The reason we say another future, because the expected future, while it's probable, it may even be most likely, it is not guaranteed. We ask, what if? What if this person loses the election? What if this particular attempt to assassinate a president is unsuccessful or successful? What if an invention succeeds or fails? What if an autonomous driving car kills somebody? Now we are into a different future. Can we know what those futures are? We can't know them all. Can we predict which one will become the future? Absolutely not. So we think of them as a set of alternative futures. Can you prepare for a set of alternative futures? People believe that you can't. You say, oh, give me the future. Tell me what the future is and I'll tell you what we're going to do. Well, unfortunately, whoever asked that question says, we can't do that. But people who make investments are making that decision all the time. If they don't realize that every investment is not guaranteed, oh, this is guaranteed to make money, you're going to make money on this, well, then you're a fool. Because there is no investment that is guaranteed to be perfect. People who say it is determined that a person's going to win an election and they lose, now we have a different future. So we think about the alternatives because the expected future. And those are both inbound. What's the outbound future? We call the outbound future the preferred future, the future that we want to see happen. Not the ones that is given us, not some alternatives, but what we want, what we will work for, what we will use our time. Now, a lot of our time, most of our time, is basically living, getting through school, getting a job, making a living, raising a family, all of those things. I'm not taking away from that. But some of our time ought to be to make a contribution to make the future better. Even a business should have that image of we're offering these products not just to make money, not just to take the customer's money and put it in the bank for us, but to make their life better, to make the world better. And certainly the nonprofits and the NGOs of the world are doing that explicitly. Teach the Future is not a business in that sense. In fact, we don't make much money, as a matter of fact, but we want the young people of the world to be thinking about the future this way, to be ready for an uncertain future and to exert some of their influence in that. So finally then, what people really want young people to do is to be leaders, to have an influence on themselves, their families, their communities. I often point out to schools, however, how often are young people given the opportunity to learn and practice that? No. Parents telling them what to do, teachers telling them what to do, all their friends telling them what to do, what to wear and how to speak and what the coolest thing is and all of that thing. When are they a chance to think for themselves, what's my preferred future? Now, you can also prefer a future in terms of a career. You want to be an engineer or a doctor or an artist, and that's fine. But again, you can't be guaranteed of any of those things. Better opportunities might come along. In that sense, we want to be able to influence the future in a sophisticated way, in an effective way, not just dreaming, but actually taking actions. And these are the ingredients that I believe are important for influencing the future. And the first ingredient is to be a leader. There's a confusion, I believe, in the term leadership. Who are leaders in our world? Most of the time, leaders are those who are in charge of things. Presidents and generals and bosses, teachers in a classroom, police on the street. Those are authorities. They're not necessarily leaders. They're not promoting change. Some of them are, could be, but they may not be. And they may be doing a good job, making decisions, protecting us, doing good things for us. Leaders are those who promote change. And what are they promoting? A visionary future. They're promoting a future that they believe is significantly better in the long run. It's not going to happen anytime soon, but in the long run. My visionary future is that we have 3 these three subjects taught in school to every person in school maybe 100 years from now. Now, to get that vision moving in that direction, you can't achieve it, but you can move towards it. We have to do planning. One of the most complicated military operations in the history of the world was the invasion of Europe by the Americans and the British in June of 1944, the D-Day invasion. Huge, complicated. The man in charge of that ultimately became a president of the United States, Dwight D. Eisenhower, and he made a famous phrase. He said, "Plans are useless." Plans are useless? What do you mean? You've just created the most complicated, most dynamic plan. He said, yes, but planning is essential. So we have to get together and talk about what's our goal, how are we going to achieve it, who's going to do what, what's the schedule, all of that stuff we do in planning, not because it then becomes written down and everybody follows it. It's not like a recipe. It's that we all know what we're doing so that when those plans don't work, which they almost never do exactly as planned, we know what to do. We know how to make adaptation. Oh, well, we're going to have to do this differently. And frankly, if you read the history of the D-Day invasion, it was successful, but it was a mess. Hardly anything they intended to happen happened the way they thought it would, but they had done planning, they had talked about it, and they knew kind of what their purposes were, and they could make adaptations. That's adaptive planning, it's called. That's flexible planning. And then finally, plans by themselves do not create change. Plans are paper, plans are ideas, plans are diagrams. What creates change is people doing things, taking action towards the plan, convincing others, recruiting others, doing inventions, creating change, changing laws, getting people to move and vote differently or to buy differently or consume differently or behave differently, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's a long-term process. We need to be patient. We need to say if we really want something important, it has took a long time for the world to get where it is today, and it's going to take a long time to get out of that, out of it into a different world. But unless we start today, we'll only delay the time that it will come forward. If we are going to include a sophisticated and effective way of dealing with the future, not just in school, but in society in general, we have to begin teaching it today. So our motto is, prepare for the future, teach the future today. Thank you very much for listening.